Okay, I call the meeting of the Urbana Historic Preservation Commission special meeting to order. Could we have roll call, please?
David Hayes,
Here.
Alice Novak,
Here.
Gina Pagliuzzo, David Seiler, Trent Shepard, and Kim Smith.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Kevin. We have no changes to the agenda, so next item is approval of minutes of the previous meeting dating October 3rd, 2018, regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those?
I move approval of the minutes.
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Kim Smith, seconded by David Seiler to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any other discussion? David, you okay with the minutes?
Perfectly good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. I want to note that we have another member who has appeared. Gina Pagliuzzo is now with us. Here. All right, next item on the agenda, written communications. We do have at least one written communication from Cynthia Hoyle. You didn't get that? Oops. Okay. So I think Craig might mention it again in his presentation. This is regarding the resurfacing project.
Right. Craig, do you just want to summarize when that item comes up? Okay, thanks.
Next, we have audience participation. This is a time, if anybody wants to speak for any of the issues or anything else, or just say Happy Preservation Month, you may do so. Is there anyone who wishes to speak about any of the issues at tonight's meeting? Phyllis, come on up.
And Happy Preservation Month.
Thank you.
I'm Phyllis Williams. I live at 810 West Main in Urbana. And I have to tell you first off that if I weren't a member of the PACA board, I wouldn't know a thing about this meeting. Because it was shared to PACA and then I was able to share it out to my neighbors. There was no, attachment you could see from the city saying who it was mailed to. And I can't really tell from, and then too, the part of the packet that was maps had no legend with it, so that it was impossible really until we got here and started talking to the man from the bicycles, what it all meant. And now I'm even more disturbed. So the only thing that seemed to make sense to us was that there's an intent to want to move the Western Historic District sign across the street in front of Mr. Wakeland's properties. No. We want it to stay on the north side of the street. It may be easier for somebody to see, but in our hearts, we earned those signs, so we want them to stay. Now, I also want you to consider doing the sidewalk treatment that was done around Leal School, which is to lay the brick again and then put some sort of polymer sand that keeps it from getting weedy, rather than making all of our sidewalks concrete. We've had terrible tree root problems, especially in front of our house at 810. It's fairly flat and very nice, actually, down towards the western corner of our block. And you're thinking of replacing it. So, let's work something out. I mean, the city staff has seen the maple tree that causes the problems for us. And, no big deal. It's a maple. What the heck? It's got roots everywhere. But you can't get a wheelchair down the sidewalk. So something needs to be done anyway. So let's do it right. Please don't let them turn our sidewalks into concrete. So I guess that's it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Randy?
Kangas, 804 West Main Street. And I'm sorry, I've been out of town and just looked at the case today, so I'm sure I don't understand exactly what the improvements are. But I guess I'm curious, are we tearing out the street and starting all over again on Main Street?
I think we'll have a lot of this addressed when the,
Well, can I talk after that then?
yes, I will allow
Okay.
that, yeah.
Then I'll hold on.
Never mind, okay.
And thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak, or if you want to speak about the sidewalk issue in particular, I'll allow questions after Mr. Schonkweiler's presentation. Any other takers? Nope. Okay. We have no continued public hearings, we have no old business, no new public hearings. New business is the next item on the agenda. We have Public Works Project discussion with Craig Schonkweiler, the Urbana City co-engineer, regarding the West Main Street Historic District, Lincoln Avenue, and Springfield Avenue resurfacing project. And there's Mr. Schonkweiler.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come to speak to you about the improvements that the city's planning for the Lincoln Avenue and Springfield Avenue resurfacing project. I have some slides here. Most of them are pictures. Also, we'll break away from the PowerPoint presentation to show a little bit more details about the improvement itself. Tonight, we're going to talk about what we have planned. We'll talk about the historic district as it stands, and then the option that you folks have before you. For the resurfacing project, in the memorandum, we had a location map, we had some existing Main Street plan, a proposed Main Street plan, and then I have some photos to go through. I'm going to break away from my PowerPoint here and pull up a more detailed model here. So the project as it stands will be from just, let me see if I can move this out of the way. Just north of Green Street here, this is Lincoln that runs north-south. We will go 1 block west on Springfield, 2 blocks east on Springfield down to just shy of Kohler. We will do improvements at the Stoughton intersection, which you see with the hand here. We'll zoom in on the Main Street improvements itself. We'll also be doing some improvements here at Clark Street. What's driving this project is we have poor pavement condition, and as we improve the pavement condition, we're required by the American Disabilities Act to bring certain parts of the sidewalk into compliance. At all intersection corners throughout the project, we will be upgrading the curb ramps. There are some locations, particularly at the Lincoln and Main intersection, where there are no curb ramps currently. With the Project 2, we'll be upgrading the west side sidewalk all the way through the project. On Springfield, it'll be the south side sidewalk. On Main Street, it'll be the south side sidewalk. We are required to at least attempt to upgrade at least one side or the other for passage for people with disabilities. We basically look at a benefit cost type analysis, and when we decide on what sidewalk to upgrade. The sidewalk on the east side of the road was not easily addressed. It's fairly narrow. There's retaining walls up and down through the corridor. It would have required right-of-way acquisition. That's way beyond the scope of this project. So the west side sidewalk was the one that we went with there. Another thing we do once we look at these projects is we go back through previous planning efforts and see if there are identified deficiencies. The bicycle master plan identified that the Lincoln and Main intersection was difficult to cross. That was through public input. They also identified the Stoughton intersection as difficult to cross, although the Stoughton intersection is not identified as a bike route through there. The Main Street section is a bike route. City staff went out and counted traffic. We have a camera system that allows us to do that. We saw a significant number of bicyclists using Main Street corridor. They mainly travel between downtown Urbana and the university campus. We also saw a pretty good amount of pedestrians also crossing that intersection. Currently, there is no median island that is safe for those folks to use. A lot of bicyclists straddle the narrow median that's out there. The intersection corners are fairly wide. The approach to the intersection is fairly wide. We see people turn in and out of Lincoln off of Main, really going a little too fast. So what we're proposing here is to drill down and basically make it a better crossing at that location. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit more. A brief overview. What we're looking here is to reclaim some of the space within the existing right-of-way. I have another drawing that I'll show you that'll give you relative to the existing and the proposed, but as we look at this, this is very similar to the exhibit that was in your packet. Basically, what we're trying to do is create safe refuge for pedestrians or bicyclists to get across Lincoln Avenue. Lincoln Avenue has about 15,000 vehicles per day. We have narrowed up the vehicle lanes to 11-foot wide lanes. That still will allow trucks to use the road. There are no bus routes up and down Lincoln at this location, but buses could use that in the future. We've shortened the crossing distance at the intersection significantly. And as you see, we'll have refuge islands that are wider where a bicyclist can safely seek refuge while they're trying to cross and get a gap. To the east here, what you see is Main Street is a bike route. This will allow the bicyclists to exit the road, go onto a multi-use path. Then they can then pick their gap to cross the road, and then as they get across the road, they can also merge back into the vehicle lane on the west side. Same approach on the south side of the road. Lincoln will be resurfaced with asphalt. The condition of East Main has several fractured panels. We also have some flat drainage considerations there, so to be able to get the ground to properly drain, we have to adjust the curb slightly. And as a result of all that, we would place a new asphalt over the top of the old concrete that's there now. We would, like I said, reclaim some of the space within the existing right-of-way. Just to give you a reference here, where the hand is up to the north, that line, that orange dash line is the existing property line. And on the south, it's right at the back of the sidewalk here. So all of our work is taking place within the existing city right-of-way. I want to go back to the presentation here. To give you some context, what we're doing here is sitting at the Lincoln and Main intersection looking to the east towards downtown. If you follow my cursor here, this would be the line, approximate line of the new curb right in here. And then the curb would come back in at about just past this streetlight pole. I have another drawing as we come down, or a picture as we come down, so it'll come in through here. The new curb line would be. We will not be removing any parking on Main Street, so we're using space that is available that is currently restricted for no parking. As we move further east here, we would be coming in existing right at the back side of the east side of this drive. Okay. Now, on the west side of the road, this is the sign that we were talking about. The existing, or the curb line would be moved out into this space into here. And then the curb would come along through this zone and then touch down somewhere basically near this tree back in here. The end of the project is about right in this zone, right in here. This would be looking at the end of the project. There's a manhole lid where the end of the project is, and now we're looking west. So the improvements would only take place up to this line, and then they would go to the west, down through there. This is the brick sidewalk that's at question. It's really not something that's actually brought before the commission for consideration, although you can certainly provide your input with respect to the historic part of the bricks. This item will be going to the city council per ordinance for consideration to convert this section of sidewalk to concrete. It's really mainly a safety issue for the bicyclist. We did seek guidance from the Urbana Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission. They did endorse the conversion of this section of brick to concrete. It mainly is a safety aspect. With bricks, they become slick, they can have ice or frost, and that can be dangerous for the bicyclist. The section to the north here, this piece, is about 61 feet. The section to the south, we're able to keep, and there's no net loss there. If there was a way that we could keep it and make it safe, we would do that, but there's really no way to do that at this location. This is the Main Street Historic sign. You know, when we have the narrowed space, it just gives us the opportunity to place the sign over there. Certainly, the sign can stay where it's at. It doesn't have to be moved. It just gives us an opportunity. I have to tell you, there are a lot of people that tell me they didn't even know there was a historic district in this zone, and mainly because as they turn the corner, there's no sign for them to see. It just gives an opportunity. You certainly don't have to move the sign. We can keep the sign where it's at. This is looking at the other end of the sidewalk with the sign. A historic district was created back in 2007 per the ordinance that's in your memorandum. I'm not going to go through all the details of that. That is out of my purveyance here. The big item, though, is that the map of the contributing and non-contributing properties. I want to skip to that map real quick here. And then I'm going to go to some photos here. So this is an overview map of the contributing and non-contributing properties. The contributing and non-contributing comes from the ordinance. You can see here that the properties hatched in blue are the contributing properties per the ordinance. The hatches in, I guess I would call it orange, are non-contributing properties. Our improvement would stop right about here where this hand's at. So we have 6 properties that are adjacent. The sole contributing property is 814 West Main. Let me go back to the presentation. So on the south side here, this would be a non-contributing property. This is the apartment complex at the southeast corner. I'll just kind of walk through so you folks can see each property. This is the next non-contributing property at 811 West Main. And then the next one at 809. This would be directly in front of where our project would end. And then when we go to the north side, backing up towards Lincoln, this is a non-contributing property at 816. This is the sole contributing property within the project limits at 814. So that's what that property looks like there. The next one, 812, is a non-contributing property. The options before you, and I guess I'll just stop a second. So we're funding this project with state motor fuel tax funds. And part of our requirements for that is to go through environmental clearances. Environmental clearances require us to also look at impacts to historic properties. We look at the National Register. There's no properties within this, well, there used to be the old Thompson School, but it's since been removed. But there's no National Register properties within this project. However, though, we have this local historic district. So when I spoke with the Department of Transportation folks, they encouraged me to come to you, and mainly to get your folks' input on what you felt the project impact is to this historic district, if at all. So you have three options before you today. One would be either to find a finding of no effect or no adverse effect, and if that is the case, then we'll just proceed on the way that we have planned. Another option is you could do no adverse effect with conditions. The conditions would be set from you folks. Sometime, let me give you an example. Let's say, as an example, we had a cobblestone street that was in alignment with the period of the houses, and we were proposing to put an asphalt street over the top of it. Maybe your condition is, no, you need to restore a cobblestone street. That could be one thing that you could recommend. With any condition, we would have to weigh out the cost and timeline impacts for those conditions and possibly go to City Council to seek further guidance. But I will tell you that I'll try to work with you, or we will work with, staff will work with you, as long as it's not something that, if you want to pave it in gold, we can't give you gold, but we would try to work with you. The other more serious one would be a finding of adverse effect. There's a definition of adverse effect in your memorandum there. If you found adverse effect, then essentially we would remove all improvements probably from that section of Maine. We could also seek further guidance from City Council. A finding of adverse effect will probably set a precedence for any kind of future improvements along Maine. It could essentially stop any chance to do any kind of improvements without City Council guidelines, that guidance there. I guess from a city staff perspective, there's hope that we could provide some balance here between improving the safety of the intersection and yet not having a negative impact on the historic properties that border or adjacent to the project. But it's certainly your folks' opinion that matters the most. Whatever is decided here will be shared with the DOT. They have qualified folks, like I mentioned in my memo, that are trained and educated, and they would then take your input and then look at it and make their own determinations. Either way, they'll forward those to the SHPO, State Historic Preservation Officer, to make also their own decision. So at this point, I'm here to answer any questions that you folks may have.
Did you want Mr. Yankee to speak now as
Sure,
well?
we can
or-
pause a minute and let him speak if he would come up.
All right. Thank you for giving me a moment. My name is Jeff Yockey. I work with Champaign County Bikes, our local bicycle advocacy organization. We've got an event going over at Weaver Park tonight that includes a ride out on the Kickapoo Rail Trail. So lots going on. It's also Bike Month. But anyway, glad to share with you here. I live on 304 West Washington Street in Urbana. I sat through this presentation with the BPAC Association, so I got a good look at it then. Also, I'm a part of producing our local bicycle map, and in there we create local riders, annotate this to encourage new riders on the best low-stress, low vehicle count roads to take to move their way across here. And a little hard to see, but we have red dots on certain intersections that are problematic for bicyclists and pedestrians to cross there. And so we have a couple of these on Lincoln Avenue, and one of them is at Main. And so we've been talking about this crossing for 5 good years and thinking hard about what kind of good solutions can work. When we think about these solutions, we're trying to think about pedestrians, cyclists, transit when that's involved, and all other vehicle traffic. So our review of this and interaction with city staff and discussions among ourselves are very favorable to to what can be done given the existing conditions and limitations of boundaries. And so there's lots of changes coming in transportation, and as we rethink roadway use by all users, how do we accommodate that? And I think this represents, I'm just looking at the same map that Craig had up here, a good compromise and good proactive thinking about what can be done. So the narrowing of lanes on Lincoln is a good move to narrow the amount of crossing distance that bicyclists and pedestrians would need. To make that, the creation of an island is really great, so you only have to figure out your first gap on either northbound or southbound traffic. That's really good. If you've either rode your bike or driven down Green Street, and you'll see the improvements that have happened with the MCOR project there along in front of the university. Cyclists are we're all learning, but getting used to accommodating bus islands and traffic from driveways and multiple access points. And so this whole idea of being on a street, and then as you approach an intersection, seeing a path take off, puts you on a multi-use path. It gets you to a place that has hash marks and a number of safety features to cross the interstate or to cross Lincoln, cross a busy road. And certain cyclists will act as a pedestrian then, or may just join the pedestrians that are waiting on the corner and see the gap and move together. As a more experienced cyclist and somebody that has a lot of comfort on the road, I would approach this intersection differently at different times of day. Sometimes when it's not, between 11 and 2 or near the morning and evening kind of busy times, I would stay on the street and cross if I was crossing this time of day, moving back and forth there. The traffic is less, it's easier to navigate. But for sure, if it's a busy time of day and I've got concerns, I would welcome this kind of development to scoot off and then cross either as a pedestrian or as a cyclist in the designated areas where the hash marks are. It involves the removal of bricks for that in front of that one lot on the northeast corner. I think you said 60 feet. There was some discussion about whether the path being wider than the existing sidewalk, could you just add some concrete, like a little concrete ribbon next to the bricks? That presents a number of challenges. You've got a seam that you've got to challenge. Bricks are going to be more liable to move, and then you've just got the conditions of clay bricks in different weather conditions. So I can remember the aha moment I had when I was about 10 years old on my paper route. I'd always watch the coyote and the Roadrunner, and the coyote would get hit on the head with a rock and see stars. And the first time I did was on my paper route bike when I came down off a sidewalk, down a driveway, and cut, like I did thousands of times on a brick road. And before I knew it, I was down flat and seeing stars for the first time. And I was like, oh, this is what they are. They really are moving. So that taught me to respect bricks. And I think it's just, for that one short thing, we would advocate creating that sidewalk just all concrete to accommodate people coming in from an angle, approaching that, and then crossing the street. If I can answer any questions, I'd be glad to from a cyclist perspective.
Any questions of commissioners?
Can you hear me? This is David Higgins. I do have a question, which is about, from the cycling perspective, that parallel ribbon idea. One of my concerns in looking at this is that it seems like a cyclist heading west on the north side would suddenly be folded in with pedestrians. That as that curve comes in, it would be like the bikers and pedestrians would mix, which doesn't seem like necessarily the healthiest or the safest approach. So my question was, might there not be some merit, in fact, to retaining the bricks and to having the additional surface, the new surface that's meant to be for cyclists going in one direction in a different and safer material, just as a way of keeping them apart? And I bike every day, and I certainly know biking around campus that having one broad concrete sidewalk can actually create some confusion. So that's my question from putting it on the table.
No, that's a good one. And having looked at this, you're going to have pedestrians going both east and west. You're going to have cyclists predominantly going from downtown towards campus because they're traveling on the right side of the road. But it's just one of those situations, like if you're riding the Constitution Trail up in Bloomington or any other place around campus where you've got a wide sidewalk, like around the quad, and pedestrians and cyclists and skateboarders and scooters are all sharing that space. We just have to be aware of each other. And as you're approaching an intersection, you're going to be reducing speed, you're coming up on a ramp. A cyclist is going to be able to scan ahead and adjust their movement accordingly. If to do what you're asking for would really create a very, very wide space, and you would have to navigate something as big as a road lane with multiple avenues for pedestrians and cyclists. But I don't think there's a problem from a cyclist point of view of sharing that space with others. And it's just, I mean, there'll be some stripes, and you're going to be aware of what you're doing, so you'll be looking for other users of that space.
Just a very quick follow-up there. Why would it be wider? Why would it need to be wider than what's proposed?
I can speak to that a little bit, Mr. Hayes. Right now we're looking at, I can't remember if it's 8 or 10 foot exactly wide, but with a bicyclist coming in, we would, the short piece there, the connecting piece to the road, that's 5 foot wide for sure. So we'd have to make the other piece at least 5 or greater too. I would point out that there are going to be yield markings on the bike path that would say yield and a yield sign. There will also be a sign on the sidewalk, the inside part of the sidewalk, that says look with a bicycle on it. That is also consistent with what we've done on Campus Town with the MCOR project on Green Street there. Those signage are almost identical to that kind of situation.
David, are you finished?
Yes.
Okay. Gina.
You mentioned the Kickapoo Rail Trail, and one of the things when I was at the City Council meeting Monday night that the mayor discussed was maybe the extension of the Kickapoo Rail Trail through Urbana.
Oh, yeah.
Which is only maybe a block or so north of West Main Street, and it looks like, I'm just wondering, I don't know how far west the extension of the Kickapoo Rail Trail would go, but if it's going to go that far west, is this kind of a moot point that maybe the Kickapoo Rail Trail will take the place of this branch of the bicycle path?
That's a great question. There's going to be a study starting very shortly that Carl and some grants are going to fund to figure out the best way to bring the trail back west into Urbana and then onward to Champaign. And whether the recommendations could be varied. It could be a trail alongside of rail, which is common. That rail line is not heavily used, one train a week or something. So might be able to utilize that right away and come in, or alternatively convert some streets to sort of bicycle boulevards where there's limited access for homeowners, but it's not a through street, and it accommodates cyclists moving through there. There could be lots of different solutions. And I think, there's ultimately going to be a development just north of here that's going to change the dynamics, increase users that are going to look for an outlet going north and south and east and west.
So I'm a part of the steering committee for that study. It's called the KRT Extension Study. We just started that study with Regional Plan Commission being the lead agency performing the study. The boundaries of that study would be from, say, Smith Road, which is just north of Weaver Park there, to Lincoln. So Lincoln is the terminus for the study. Part of the study is as Mr. Yockey indicated, would be to, what's the best way to get along that corridor. But the crossing of Lincoln or going to the west is really not, at this point, part of the study. Any study, though, will determine, the best alignment. It'll also do some preliminary cost estimating Then we have to go through the grant phase if we can get monies, and then you got to do the implementation phase. So it'll be quite a while, I think, before anything physically gets built. I don't see this as a redundancy to that study. I think here it's proven that bicyclists do ride from downtown Urbana to the U of I and back using this route. I don't see them going down on Springfield. I don't really see them up on Clark where the bricks are. I don't see them so much on Stoughton. There's some, but not enough. We didn't find that there was enough of a need in the bike master plan update in 2016 to make Stoughton, a route. But Main Street is definitely a bike route.
Any other questions from commissioners before I open it back up to the audience? No? Okay.
All right. Thank you very
to both
much.
of you. So, as agreed, I will allow audience participation on this subject only now. Does anyone wish to ask questions or speak? Randy?
Well, I understand the project a little bit better. So you're not resurfacing Main Street, you're resurfacing 60 feet of Main Street. Or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be more like, so the end of the project on Main would be, it's approximately 207 feet from the center of Lincoln and Main to the east.
And you're not tearing out, you're just putting down asphalt.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
You can sit if you want.
Okay.
And my comments are not directed at you guys or engineers. At every level of government, we underfund civil engineer and infrastructure. But just a few comments, and I'm not an engineer, and some of these are not historic preservation. If you look at that map, one block north, we're going to add a 65-foot tall building with up to 500 people and supposedly commercial. And I think you're trying to steer them all around back through Maine, correct?
There was a traffic impact study performed for the rail development that you're mentioning there. And it was indicated that from that study, from what I recall, that there would not be a huge amount of traffic using the Clark Street intersection, nor necessarily on Busey. There would be some traffic on Busey, but not appreciably a large amount. It's felt that development would generate more, because there's students, more pedestrian and bicycle use.
Okay. So just a few comments about the engineering. While I would agree this narrowing makes it a lot better for pedestrian or bikes, that is a very heavily used arterial street with really big trucks, garbage trucks and bigger trucks. And so you're compressing them together, and I just wonder if you're asking for accidents that way. And so that's a problem. And we're adding at least around 500 people or 1,000 trips a day, one block north of here. And if you cross the street on University, we're adding, 500 or 1,000 more beds? So we're increasing the density here dramatically, and I wonder if you're doing the Main Street one, if you're also going to be doing the other ones, and then you're starting to back up traffic. These are just random thoughts. I haven't thought about it as much as I would like. The other thing is, at the end of Main Street, when you come down, there are 2 lanes at the end. So we're getting rid of one of those lanes. Right now, you can turn right and sometimes get into the street. If you're trying to turn left, you're stuck very often, especially during certain times of the day. If there's one lane and you want to go right, you're going to be stuck, so you're going to back up traffic. That means people will probably go elsewhere. I don't know how people will behave. But I just wonder how all of that will pan out, or if it will make it worse. I don't really know. So I don't know how all of this is going to work. I would say all of Main Street, that if it's a bike corridor, if you've driven down it, it can be exciting because bikers will veer out away from the holes in the street, and so you got to be very careful that you're not running into them. So in some ways, I'm disappointed you're only doing 60 feet and not all of Main Street. Two more comments, which is more related to improvements. The Clark 65-foot tower with 500 people, the developer said at the city hearing, and I wrote it down, and this was a quote, because I thought it was an odd quote at the time, "The heart and soul of this project is the brick street." That brought a historic feel to it. And here we are on historic Main Street pulling out bricks. So maybe it's necessary, maybe it's not, and I understand that there are now multiple good ideas that are always in competition. That being curb cuts, which also can create other problems. Lastly, in terms of the sign, you're probably not aware of it. The city had a lawsuit many years ago. Howard Wakeland was absolutely opposed to everything, whatever he got. And there was a lawsuit, and the neighborhood was forced to intervene financially to help the city defend this. Told by the city administration, you need to contribute to this. So several of us, including Phyllis and Joe and me and Suzanne and many others, put together a fund to fight Wakeland upzoning. That was before the historic district. So if you move the sign over onto a Wakeland property, I think most of us would find that pretty insulting. Maybe that doesn't bother anybody, but I got to live with my wife. And so I would be a little sensitive to doing something like that. I'm sure Howard wouldn't care one way or the other, but the rest of us would be deeply insulted. So anyway, I'm a little confused of whether this will really improve things because, as you said, there's an enormous amount of changes. We're increasing the density like 100-fold in that corner, and I wonder how people will actually behave in terms of bikes, cars, and everything else. They are adding 250, 270 parking spots in this development for 450, 480 beds, plus retail, plus employees, plus whatever else. I wonder where all they're going to park, but we seem to be rehashing the same things. But I'm wondering if on Clark you need the same thing that you're going to have on Main Street, and then again you're going to be backing up traffic continuously. And you know, traffic here is different than traffic in Chicago, but it's still a problem. So, last comment, and this is not to irritate the engineer. But we were told several times that there are no need for improvements due to this 500-foot tower or 500-person tower 1 block behind us. We're told repeatedly on Clark, on Busey, on Main, there's no need for improvements. I think you can find that in the minutes, and here we are starting to need improvements. So, again, I know I'm carping a lot, and most of it you probably have no say on, but I thought you might want to think more holistically about how dramatically that corner is changing and the engineering needs of all of that. Happy to try and answer questions.
Any questions of Randy? No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to make any comments? No. Okay. Then we're back to discussion.
Well, I definitely think we should keep the sign on the north side of the street. I'm a little concerned with the merging traffic. I don't know if that's something that we get a say in, or if we're looking primarily at the scale of the sidewalk at 10 feet and bicycles merging with pedestrians, I think is a concern. I work in downtown Urbana, and there's bicycles on the sidewalks all the time, and it's just a nightmare. So don't know what to say about that. 10 feet seems pretty wide, and maybe it won't be an issue.
I'd like to follow up on that, which is that in just with, I mean, looking at the plan and as somebody who teaches in landscape architecture, I'm really not, I hear 10 feet and can appreciate that as a decent dimension if your goal is to serve both pedestrians and bicyclists separately. And again, as somebody who bicycles all the time, I see places on campus where there are two discrete ribbons side by side, and either because of how the paths follow or because there's even a tiny margin of grass in between them, because of how things are marked, it seems like an opportunity here to keep them separate and keep people safe. I mean, I agree with the remark just made. Having people fold in together, it may work and bicyclists may be attentive, but it can make pedestrians very apprehensive at that moment regardless. But there's just so many good examples in our community of where having two, say, 5-foot parallel ribbons makes sense. For pedestrians going in two directions, that's fine, and for bicyclists going in one direction, that's fine. There really shouldn't be anybody biking on the north side going east, for example, and arrows marked on the surface of concrete could do that. So I guess just looking at the existing brick and imagining scenarios where two paths might come together, the bicycle path might just come a little bit, it might not touch it. It might just be a short distance south of it, for example, until you get right up to the corner where you have the curb cuts and something like that. It just seems like from the design perspective, there's a win-win here, which is increasing safety for cyclists and pedestrians while retaining the bricks that are there that really do contribute to the character of the neighborhood.
Maybe this is for Craig. For the parallel ribbon idea, then how much space is there between the brick pavement versus the new pavement?
You know, I'd have to think on that. I mean, we haven't, I can tell you, I mean, in 14 years, we've never done anything like that. It doesn't mean it can't be done. I mean, there are these thin strips within the university district. You know, I think if we were going to do something like that, it'd be a minimum of at least 2 foot in between, but then we would have to merge them together once we neared the intersection corner, because if we kept it going across the intersection itself, now we would defeat there's not enough space from the corner, the end of the nose of the refuge island to allow that much space. So we'd still have to merge it down to cross and then go, you know, separate out as we moved east from the intersection too. You know, I mean, if you're really wanting to keep the bricks and you feel that that's a part of the historic district, I mean, that could be a condition that you find that, you know, you would like city staff to explore the you know, the retainage of those bricks because it contributes to the historic district.
So if we wanted to go along with that, then that would be a no adverse effect with conditions?
Yes, yes. And then what we would do is go back to the drawing board, try to see if we could come up with something, a compromise there that would work for you folks, you know, and I mean, what I'm hearing is that's kind of where you would like to see it go. So, you know, I'm open to trying anything if we can figure it out.
Okay.
And jumping in there, I think that, I mean, the dimensions, the drawings that you've made really work. And in part they work because I can still see the bricks, and so it's possible for me to imagine those two parallel ribbons. Mm-hmm. But also I am aware of many examples where, even where there isn't a margin in between them, where you just have two different kinds of surfaces, and that's so helpful for understanding that it isn't about emerging, it's about keeping the two forms of circulation separate. So I think that you could accomplish this within the very scope of what you've laid out here. And if you did want to introduce margins in between them, like even a strip of grass or something like that, they don't have to be that wide, because the main purpose is just to indicate that these are discrete in their intended function. There are examples on campus. There are lots of great examples in cities and in the United States and elsewhere. So I kind of love the idea, since you say that the city hasn't done it before, maybe it's an opportunity just to take a look at those possibilities and just see how they might be implemented in other places too, for keeping the forms of circulation separate.
David, by chance, do you have any photographs of some good examples of this?
I could easily find some. I mean, there's one site that I can see in my head right now in Paris, in the subgrade section of the Promenade Plantée in Paris. They actually bring bicycle lanes and pedestrian lanes together in one place. They even have a rail in between them to keep them from keep anyone from crossing over. But that's in part because they have a narrower area in which to work, and they're going through underpasses. But I'm also thinking of like the area on campus just north of Cersei, the gym between there and the children's research, the kind of play area for children that's on Nevada Street. And so that's a place where there are two ribbons and they're quite separate, and then they cross. There's a lot of construction going on in the west end of that area. But so they're wholly separate. And in theory, just to the east of that, towards campus, towards Lincoln Avenue, there is a place where they brought things together in a very wide way, but then they pull off the bicycle ribbon. So it might be interesting just to take a look at some of those, and I'm sure there are many others in our community.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hayes, are you able to see the drawing that I have?
So the one that you were showing earlier that shows the proposed improvements, I have the document in front of me. Oh, so this, no, okay. Right, I can see that now, yes.
Okay, so this one has some of the fill elements turned off.
Right.
Can you see the hand there that I've got?
Yeah.
So that's the section of brick right here. So if we could retain that, in essence, pull this piece where my hand is, almost pulling it down and away from the bricks to where it would maybe run something more like this, but then as we enter close to the intersection, we would have to merge back together at this location.
And that's exactly what I was thinking about, because when you get there, it has to be there, and in crossing the street,
Right.
But if you do it that way, where you pull it down, then you're actually encouraging bicyclists to slow down, because they see how it's merging with pedestrians. And then I think it might also be teaching people, in a sense, how to cross the street. The pedestrians are going to be tending to be on the north side of that, and bicyclists would be tending to be on the south side of that. But in the drawing that is there, the reason why that bicycle lane goes up as quickly as it does to the north, and then goes straight across, is simply so that the two materials could be one material with the minimum needed width.
Right.
But if you keep them separate, then it doesn't have to curve up so quickly.
Right. I'm open to pursuing that here, with the understanding that we still may have some adjustments in this space here, but that would allow the vast majority, almost 80% of the bricks to retain with pulling the path down. On the south side, we would right here, the bricks stop on the east side. Of course, we have a non-contributing property on the south. You don't see the drawing here, but there's some layers turned off, but there's a couple driveways here that may prohibit that kind of similar action. I don't have those on here, but we have a space where we have to put a sign in the middle here, for safety reasons. So if we pulled this back down, that may negate some of that space that's available for the signage or the delineation of the driveways. So I guess that's my next question. Are we talking just the northeast corner where we have the net loss of bricks, that we would retain those bricks, and then possibly, not changing the design on all four corners? Or I can investigate all four, I guess.
So my sense of that would be, I mean, you'll need to look at that carefully. And one of the virtues of doing it this way would be to save the bricks that are there, which contribute to the character of the neighborhood.
Right.
On the south side of the street, it would seem important if you didn't delaminate those two lines. It would seem important, nevertheless, to mark them in such a way that bicyclists and pedestrians would understand how to circulate there in ways that are parallel. So, I mean, that could be, painted lines, simple markings on the pavements, or using some of the visual signs like the triangles that get painted on campus that alert people to be attentive and to stay here or to go, in a particular direction.
Right.
So.
Okay, those are all good points.
Craig, I have a question, and forgive me, I wasn't at BPAC when this was discussed, but in reading the memo, it was in my head, the impression that I got was that the discussion at BPAC was concerned that in snow, in rain, I'm also thinking when it's dark out, it would be difficult to maybe to discern that there's a difference there, and that it could lead to, if you're riding a bike, you hit the brick and then you crash. That's just the impression that I got.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking about it tonight and thinking if there's a little bit of snow down there, you're probably not going to be able to see one way or the other, especially if there's a strip in the middle, or one way or the other. So.
My husband and I cleaned the whole block. We do, every snow.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that's a very important point about like bicycle safety, but it's also true that bicyclists already in a complex situation like Urbana have to be very attentive. There are so many potholes that can really take you off your bike. I've hit potholes in Urbana that are so intense that my bike, which is designed for rocky surfaces, has had the chain get knocked off. So I think it's obviously very important to not create a situation that's ambiguous where somebody would be confused. But I think that having the materials be different would actually help that from a cyclist's perspective. Being able to see a continuous line that's qualitatively different from another line would really encourage you to stay on that path. It would make it easier to do.
Okay.
I think we can explore it. I think the one caveat would be, let's say that, as Kevin noted, maybe we do have some incidents, though, where there's safety concerns where people have slipped or fallen or things like that. Then we would probably come back, though, and at that point ask for the conversion of the brick to concrete, because it is a true safety hazard. So there's a balance here that we're trying to seek. I understand that. It's just understanding that it could be a watch and monitor if we can figure out how to separate these two movements. With that, I guess I'm trying to be sensitive here to balance these needs and yet not, in essence, halt the project completely. That's my one concern here, because I think that, again, if we do pull these improvements, then we're, I can tell you as city engineer, it's going to be really hard to come back again for anything. And, and we could weigh that all out, but we're probably not going to come back and try to tackle this again. And I'm more worried about that. I guess what I'm saying is I'm willing to compromise to try to figure out a way to make this work for you folks and the bicyclists and everybody. I think of Urbana, and I think we're all about alternatives. So this sounds like one of them.
Craig, you mentioned that timeliness is kind of the essence here. When is this project slated to happen?
Well, that's a good question. We have a lot of environmental clearances yet to get through. We have some easement acquisition to obtain. We're in the final plan preparation phase right now. When I mentioned timeliness, these type of changes aren't of concern to me, major concern. It's when we start removing whole sections of the project that changes the whole timeliness component. In an ideal world, we would already be under construction, but we don't live in an ideal world. So, my hope is that I'd like to get this thing out to bid here late summer, fall. It will take all of 2020 to build. So I think there's some flexibility, ma'am, if we have to.
Yeah, I did hear the mayor, again, on Monday night, say that this was a project that was going to be coming up and before the HPC, and that, she mentioned it as part of the budget presentation.
that's right.
And she said that she was concerned that, any kind of setback here could be have a big financial implication to the city. So
Yeah.
that's why I asked for the clarification.
We, the Springfield pavement's driving a lot of this project. It's not in the best shape, and but I think adjustments are different than wholesale changes, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, Dave?
One question to go back to the separation of the bike path, the sidewalk. What element might, be between the two? I mean,
Well,
a grassy path would be nice, but
yeah, it could be grass. We could look at, I'm trying to balance this in my head. I'm thinking of the historic bricks. I think Mr. Yaki's correct. I'm not sure we would want those exactly right next to the path. If we did any kind of colored strip, that may also not look the best with the
Yeah.
bricks. So it might be just, quite frankly, a grass strip. And it could be a grass strip that's X amount of foot wide. I don't know. One other option is some type of mulch plantings of some sort, that would allow something to be planted in there. But again, somebody has to maintain those
Yeah.
too. It could be, another thing we've used is crushed granite, but it's a red granite, or we could use some other color, but then again, that's right next to the bricks, and I guess that's the question back to you folks, is there a preference from the historic perspective?
My vote would be grass.
Grass.
yeah, that would be nice.
Or the other thing that Dave mentioned was maybe a rail and not a strip,
A rail.
like a rail that would go in between the two.
So the thing with the rail would be that at each end, you would have a start and stop. And then there's always the concern with safety on something like that a bicyclist could then strike that rail. So we would, I think we'd probably lean towards a grass strip if we would. Whether or not that would be 2 foot wide or 1 foot or 1.5, we'd have to figure out what kind of space we could do to squeeze that in.
And if you're pulling the path down, then it's actually not going to be a consistent width anyhow.
Right.
It seems like it would be just a continuation of the grass that you're already adding
Right.
there as you come up to the place where the paths converge currently.
Right.
So simply extend that and fade out and would look terrific.
Right. if we did this, what you folks are planning, then we wouldn't go to city council and request the conversion of this. Then we would stop and try to get this to work. One other option that I had thought of in lieu of this was down at the southwest corner of Busey and Main. There's some concrete conversions that have already taken place. It would be outside the scope of this project, but we could, with another project, go in and convert those back to brick. And that would be directly adjacent to what was considered then a strong contributor to the historic district. That would be sort of like, it would be something in lieu of this. So you would remove the bricks here, which is adjacent primarily to a non-contributor, and try to restore bricks down at another location within the historic district, in lieu of. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Phyllis, if you have comments, you'll have to come up to the mic. You don't? Okay.
Well, no, I do, but I've already been to the mine. But I mean, the concrete he's talking about is near Jacobson's, but it comes up that little incline. And then when you get to the cross sidewalk, it meets up with brick going south and brick coming to the west. And that works, it's okay, but you're talking about something entirely different down at our,
Do you
very flat.
do you know what she's talking? Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Since she wasn't on mic, can you summarize, please?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull up a Google image. And maybe, ma'am, if you could come up, just so the other gentleman could hear. But let me pull up a map so that we can make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, this is, well, you said southwest corner, and so that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right in front of Jacobson's. Because you see, we shovel out those corners too, because otherwise paraplegics can't get through there when it snows.
Right.
Nobody clears them otherwise.
Let me see if I can drop the little guy in and see if we can see
Okay.
it as we turn the corner here.
It keeps older people fit.
So.
There we go. Okay, so you see, this is a fairly good incline. Well, this is flat land around here.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is concrete right up to there. The other corners are also,
Right,
with the corner near 802 being kind of short.
right,
Right.
right.
But, yeah, all of these were done with concrete
Right.
and then cutting in.
What I was talking about would be, we would leave the approach as concrete, but there's a section of concrete that goes all the way up to here.
No,
This whole piece, that piece plus this piece
no.
would be the
it's not-
conversion of that to brick. So we would take the
There's
concrete.
brick right there, Craig.
That's concrete.
Oh, okay.
So it's concrete all the way up to a certain point. And what I'm talking about is the conversion, the restoration of
That,
that to brick.
And then that
this one goes
Oh, up
almost
to
out
Jacobson
tree.
Stairs.
We would
Yeah.
still leave the ramp because we have to meet ADA, the
Right.
American Disabilities Act. I don't know if the net gain there would be the equivalent of what we would lose at the other location, but
but we
I'm
don't
just
want
throwing
to lose
that.
the other location.
I'm
you
just
see,
saying
that's-
this is a balance where the other location is not a contributing property.
Okay. Remember, please, that part of what made contributing and not contributing is not style or age of home. It was whether or not the homeowner decided that they wanted to be contributing to the historic district. That's why 812 is not contributing, but it is certainly an old house. And 814 is contributing, it's who owned them, and not style.
Okay.
So, and Fernando at 816 did indeed want to be part of the historic district. So, that Michael Walker used to live there. We could probably put up a plaque. So,
Okay.
Well, this was just something to
Sure.
consider, just like the sign. I think, I didn't realize that the sign, I was wading into something treacherous there, but now I know. And we can certainly leave that sign exactly in its same spot.
good.
We will not move it over near Mr. Walker property,
Wakeland.
Wakeland, I mean,
Yeah,
at all.
thank you.
That was totally inadvertent, and I didn't put it in the memo to be facetious, so.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm
thank
sorry
you.
to be,
Thank you, Phyllis.
okay.
All right, any,
I have one more question while we're talking about signs. Did you say that the right-of-way or the yield and the look-for bikes would be signs?
Yes, and there would
Okay.
be small signs that would be, they're not huge, but they're
Okay.
the small for bicycle signs, yes.
And they would be
They
in
would be
front of
like,
814
yeah, they would be, is this yeah, they would be in front of 814.
and then in front of 811 across the street?
Yes, across the street, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
okay,
Just
thank
wanted to
you.
make sure.
All right, so I think we're done with discussion, and so I would like to look for a motion, please. We have 3 choices that the staff has provided us, and I think we seem to be leaning toward the no adverse effect with conditions. We might want to specifically mention the conditions we'd like investigated, which seems to be the parallel ribbon. So, Dave, you want to take a stab? Motion? Yeah, so it's on page 2 and 3 of the staff memo.
We discuss the conditions first.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I think we need to look, have the city review the maintaining the brick sidewalk on the north side of the street and separating that would be my recommendation, separating the bicycle path from the existing brick sidewalk with either, I tend to think of, a landscape bed or a planting strip would be what I would recommend that they look at. I also kind of think about the south side, and I don't know if that's worth looking at too, trying to kind of mirror the image of the north side. Not that we would have the brick sidewalk, but we would still have the 2 separating pathways. And I see in your drawing here, in this exhibit in our handout, that there is that little triangular grass area where you've got the signage, but it looks like you might still be able to, if you're looking at 1.5 feet or 2 feet, it might be worth looking at.
Yeah, I walked that area tonight, and it looks like where the second driveway to the east is, that's currently brick.
Where's this?
Right here, where it says Conk, just west of the Look for Bikes sign.
Right.
That's on the south side. So that area that's green right there in the drawing is currently brick.
That's
And
correct.
that looks like the only part that's brick. The rest of it is concrete from that point forward. So really, we'd only be looking at 5 feet, one way or the other. I don't think it's any wider than that. So just where that driveway terminates on the west side is where the concrete starts. So that would be the only change on the south side.
What do you think about trying to do that on the south side, like the north side? I just think it kind of softens the whole thing. I mean, the expanse of that 10-foot pavement, and I know safety is a concern, and as you get closer to Lincoln Avenue, I can see where those could merge together, but I just would like to look at that, have them look at it.
And following up on that, they do have to merge together at Lincoln Avenue. So I guess one way to word the recommendation would be to keep the 2 paths separate for as long as possible by pulling the one path south, for example, on the north side, keeping the trajectory of it not actually parallel, but angled coming up to that point. So, and the argument would be that it's in order to preserve the character of the sidewalk on the north side, the bricks it might become an opportunity to actually add bricks on the south side, or not, but always with the idea that you're trying to preserve the character of the pedestrian sidewalk while keeping the bicycle path separate and safely surfaced, and everyone sort of on those trajectories. So, I mean, yeah, so simply put, it would be just like the recommendation would be to try to figure out a way to keep them materially and spatially separate for as long as possible as they come up to the place where they do need to converge.
Ms. Novak, can I speak?
Yep.
Mr. Hayes, I think, and Ms. Smith, I think we can investigate both sides.
Okay, and then there's that motion idea.
Maybe David should do it. He's
David?
had that down.
You mean how to word it?
Yes.
I feel like I just got really wordy there. Or you're just saying right now that to move to grant a finding of no adverse effect with conditions. The conditions being to see if it's to find a way to preserve bricks whenever possible for the character of the neighborhood, but also to keep pedestrian and bicycle circulation separate for as long as possible as those converge at the curb cuts, as they get up to that point.
That sounds like a motion to me.
I'll second that.
Second by Gina. Thank you, David. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. David, did we hear you?
Oh, I hope so. Aye.
Okay. All right. So option 2 passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Right,
of
and I want to just comment that, this is exactly how things are supposed to work, where we work
Thank
things
you.
out, so I appreciate all the input. Thank you.
Thanks for your input.
All right, for the next item on the agenda, I have a conflict of interest, so I am passing things over to Kim Smith, our vice chair.
Can I get clarification? Who seconded that motion?
Gina.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'd like to open the new business HB 2019 NRN01, a request by Alice Novak to nominate the Urbana Downtown Historic District, consisting of 42 contributing and 3 non-contributing structures, to the National Register of Historic Places. Staff?
Ready for answering questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your time tonight. On behalf of the City of Urbana, Alice Novak submitted a nomination to the Illinois State Historic Preservation Office to list the Urbana Downtown Historic District on the National Register of Historic Places. The district is generally bound by Illinois Street, Cedar Street, Goose Alley, Water Street, Walnut Street, and Vine Street, and covers approximately 7 city blocks as designated in the application. The SHPO has determined that the nomination satisfies the National Register standards for documentation and will present the nomination to the Illinois Historic Sites Advisory Council on June 28th. The Historic Preservation Commission and the mayor of certified local governments may review, comment, and solicit public remarks on the nomination and advise ISAC on whether or not the proposed district satisfies the National Register criteria for nomination. The Historic Preservation Ordinance provides guidelines which the Commission must use to evaluate potential sites for the National Register. Neither the ordinance nor the National Register review process require the Commission to conduct a public hearing. Following the collection of all comments up to and during any public meeting the commission may conduct, the commission should review all information presented that is pertinent to the nomination and provide comments to ISAC on whether or not the proposed district satisfies the National Register criteria for nomination. Since in this case the chair is the applicant, the vice chair should complete the form submitted to the CLG for completion. So as we were saying, the proposed district includes 42 contributing resources or buildings and 3 non-contributing resources, and also includes the previously National Register listed Urbana Lincoln Hotel and Lincoln Square Mall, which are shown here in the red star, and the other 3 Urbana local landmarks are shown on the map as well. In 2017, Dan Maloney, then the new owner of the Cohen Building located at 136 West Main Street, was working with city staff on a redevelopment agreement to renovate the building into a new restaurant or bar space with apartments or offices on the upper floor. Many of the buildings in downtown Urbana are eligible for a 10% tax credit for rehabilitating older commercial buildings. Mr. Maloney expressed interest in the historic preservation tax incentive, which is a 20% federal tax credit available to those buildings located in a designated National Register site district. Since this time, Mr. Maloney has submitted an incentive application based on the city's application for inclusion of the proposed district on the National Register. He also hosted a meeting for property owners to learn more about a potential district and the associated tax incentives. On April 7th, 2017, staff from the ISHPO, Professor Novak, and planners from the City of Urbana toured downtown Urbana and the Cohen Building, which is a preliminary step to help SHPO staff determine whether the area could qualify for listing as a district on the National Register. After their visit and further review, SHPO staff indicated that downtown Urbana was a likely candidate for inclusion as a district on the National Register. On June 7th of 2017, city staff presented this potential National Register district to the Historic Preservation Commission with detailed information on the process and a potential timeline. Step 4 of the process was recently completed when Professor Novak and her Planning for Historic Preservation class submitted the completed nomination registration form to the SHPO on April 22nd of 2019. Landowners and neighbors of the proposed district were sent an invitation to submit comments and or attend the Commission's public meeting held today. Step 5 is the public hearing by ISAC on June 28th, which will be in Springfield and will be attended by city staff. Landowners in the proposed district will be notified of this meeting by mail 30 days before this meeting by ISAC. Let's see. The 3 buildings located here that are in the proposed district are the Urbana Lincoln Hotel, Busey's Hall, and Tiernan's Block. The application itself includes a narrative description of the district, which includes information on its geographical development. The application includes geographical information in the settings section, and individual properties are described and grouped into regions. Under Section 1210 of the zoning ordinance, the Commission shall use the guidelines of the National Register to evaluate potential sites for nomination to the National Register. The staff report lists all 4 of those criteria. The 2 criteria that were submitted in the application are criteria A, which talks about districts that possess integrity of location, setting, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, and that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad pattern of our history, and criteria C in this application that embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master. The nomination application states that the district and its properties meet criteria A and C. which are criteria 2 and 4 of the National Register criteria, as well as the criteria in the Historic Preservation Ordinance. And the application nominates the district under the areas of significance of commerce and politics and government for criteria A, and under architecture for criterion C, which is distinctive characteristics. So the nomination registration form is very informative and very thorough, and I'm not going to go through all of it, and I know you appreciate that. But, so we'll not let you read that yet. Criterion 2 talks about association with significantly contributing events. Under politics and government, the application summarizes the significance that the district held in commercial and government and political activities in the early history of Urbana, such as 5 courthouses have been located on the current courthouse square. Detail of those courthouses, establishment, construction, and use are provided, including design of the 1895 courthouse by Joseph Royer's firm. Also, in the realm of commerce, the application summarizes the evolution of commerce through the pre-railroad years, the fast growth of the 1850s, and the post-Civil War growth of the 1870s. Based on the importance of the county courthouse and politically related events significant to the district, staff recommends a finding that the district satisfies the politics and government area of significance of criterion 2 of the National Register. In addition, based on the important contribution of the individual properties towards developing a successful, diverse commercial center in the district, staff recommends a finding that the district satisfies the commerce area of significance of criterion number 2. Together, these findings support the claim that the district satisfies criterion number 2, a district that is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. As far as criterion number 4 goes, the architectural styles in the district reflect the periods of development and growth in the downtown, as well as rebuilding after the 1871 fire. And these are listed on the screen. There are 8 different architectural styles listed in and described in the nomination application for your reading pleasure. And the application also goes through and lays out examples of each of those architectural styles in the district. I'm going to go through some pictures now, and we will fly 2 birds with 1 stone. If you want to yes. There are more of these photo maps in the back. These are for them. If you look at the handout that Kevin will be passing out, you can follow along. On the back, there's the list of the photographs. The photographs that you'll see popping up on your screen, though, will have the labels on there. So if you're like me and you don't know every building in downtown Urbana, this might be helpful. So we've got Champaign County Courthouse, the 100 block of West Main Street with 4 contributing properties, including 108 West Main Street, 114 West Main Street. Looking eastward along West Main Street, we've got 136 to 100. We've also got the Nat Cohen building at 136 West Main Street. This is Mr. Maloney's property that he is renovating. We've got the 200 block of West Main Street on the north side, as well as the Knights of Pythias building at 214 West Main Street. And further west, we've got the Stevens building at 218. Going a little further west, we've got the Kirby's, now the Kirby's Firestone building at 303 West Main Street. Moving east along the south side of West Main Street, we've got the Urbana parking deck. We've got Tiernan's Hall at 115 West Main Street. 119 through 125 West Main Street on the south side, the Knowlton Bennett Building at 135 West Main Street, a south side shot of the Urbana parking deck from along Elm Street, the Rose Bowl Tavern at 106 North Race, which was a U.S. Post Office earlier. The Courier Building, the Courier moved here from a previous location. The new location was 111 North Race Street. The American Legion Building at 107 North Broadway, and the 100 block of North Broadway, 201 North Broadway on the west side of Broadway, the Independent Media Center, which is the historic U.S. Post Office locating at 202 South Broadway, and the Urbana Lincoln Hotel at 209 South Broadway, the First United Methodist Church at 304 South Race, and a shot of Lincoln Square along West Illinois and South Vine Streets, the Howard Apartment Building at 402 South Race Street, the Urbana Free Library at 210 West Green Street, an older Phillips 66 filling station, which is now Bluebird Boutique at 212 West Green Street, the Fegis House at 206 South Cedar Street, historically, it wouldn't all fit in here, historically Tepper and Gwen Law Office at 207 West Elm Street, and the Joseph Royer section of the Urbana Free Library from along the South Race Street side, and back to the courthouse. So the summary of staff, we'll go back. So now that you've seen these 8 architectural styles and the wonderful buildings that comprise the district, based on the breadth of architectural styles found in the district and the depth of the number of examples of these styles in the district, staff recommends a finding that the district satisfies one aspect of criterion number 4 of the National Register, which is that it embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction. In addition to the number of outstanding examples of master architect Joseph Royer that are found in the district, staff recommends a finding that the district satisfies a second aspect of criterion number 4 of the National Register, which is that it represents the work of a master. Staff recommends the following findings based on the application and analysis given earlier. The Historic Preservation Commission may revise these findings based on their review and consideration of the case, including any evidence that may be submitted during the public meeting. I laid out the staff findings in the memo, and they are basically about that the application meets the criteria of 2 of the criteria of the National Register, and the options for the Historic Preservation Commission. Because this isn't a public hearing and there is not a vote required, it is basically an evaluation of the criteria for the application. The wording that we came up with was the options are A, come to a general consensus that the nomination meets one or more of the selected criteria for nomination to the National Register of Historic Places and direct the Vice Chair to complete the application to be submitted to the ISAC selecting approve, or come to a general consensus that the nomination does not meet any of the criteria for designation and direct the Vice Chair to complete the application selecting not approved. And the staff recommendation is the former, that the Historic Preservation Commission come to a general consensus that the nomination meets the National Register criteria number 2 and 4. Thank you. Ms. Novak is here to answer questions because she's the expert.
Thank you very much. And that really is, this is just a wealth of information here. Your students and you did a very good job. One question that we kind of, I think would be good to do is talk about being on the Historic Register, what implications does that have towards the property owners within that district? Any kind of restrictions placed upon them, or?
It's a common misconception that listed in the National Register has some means of protection for properties. It does not at all. We unfortunately see things here locally and otherwise that are demolished even though they're listed on the National Register. So it's mainly a recognition, it's mainly an honor. And in this case, it was a way to make allow property owners to be eligible for the 20% rehabilitation investment tax credit. That if the property owner chooses to use the 20% tax credit and qualifies, then there are restrictions. The state gets to review, you have to follow the Secretary's guidelines, and the National Park Service reviews as well. So, that's a choice by the property owner if they want to use the 20% tax credit. Marcus mentioned the 10% tax credit, and I did want to clarify that that's been gone for the last year plus as a part of the last economic reform that went through. And the 20% was a great credit. There was also no architectural restrictions as part of that. It was based on whether the property had been built before 1936, which was the 50-year mark at that point. So anyway, unfortunately, that is no more. That was a chance for a lot of property owners to take advantage of that. But National Register listing would have meant that the property owner could not have taken the 10% tax credit. So now with the 10% gone, there's no reason not to be on the National Register. There's nothing prohibitive about it.
I have a question about, I'm sorry, Kim. So there was a discussion Monday night about the Lincoln, or the Landmark Hotel. And one of the things that came up was that there's now a 25% state income tax credit that can be taken as long as you apply for that when you're applying for National Register, or when you are applying for the federal credit. So have you heard about that?
There is a state credit that passed at the very end of last year in Illinois. And I honestly, one of the things I know about it is that it was so poorly written, they're having trouble coming up with the rules of how to get through the state tax credit. And I haven't heard whether that's been resolved or not. There also is something called the redevelopment zones, and those are areas that are on river areas, Mississippi River, and there are places in Joliet, the Pierre Marquette
What was it called? The River's Edge?
zone, something
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's four towns or something. That's it.
Yeah. And so there's some rule where if you're in one of the River's Edge zones that or if you want to take the tax credit, I don't know, there's some intertwining of the tax credit and the River's Edge zones. And I'm not familiar with it, obviously.
And then one more question is, when you had the meeting with the property owners of the properties, what was the general consensus? I mean, are we expecting that the property owners are not happy about this, or are looking forward to this honor, or?
That's a Kevin question.
It was mostly, well, we invited all property owners to the meeting, to the informational meeting, and I think 2 or 3 showed up. So I guess at that point it was indifference, or maybe just curiosity from a few folks. I think, Marcus, you probably fielded a few phone calls from people, and I think, and you can speak to this, but just from our conversations, it sounds like a lot of it is just the dealing with what Alice mentioned. There's a misconception that somehow National Register listing, which you would think it would have some sort of, it's nationally significant, right? But it's actually not something that restricts what you can do with your property.
There are some education that needs to be done. There's some misconceptions. Usually there are concerns about our demolition delay ordinance, which is completely separate from the National Register. And it doesn't stop somebody from demolishing their building, it just increases the length of time that that delay is before the demolition permit can be issued. And so when I finally get through to them that this proposed National Register district does not include any additional restrictions, they're like, oh, okay, is there a reason why we shouldn't do it? No. And that the only restrictions are if you utilize federal funds to do work on your property, then it needs to meet those requirements that come along with that, like any other government grant. And the three people that I've talked with are like either highly in support of it or like, okay, there's no problem with it really.
Thanks.
Do you have any comments on the qualification of the nomination to the National Register?
My comment would be that this is a really well-documented document. I highlighted and went through the whole thing and really thoroughly enjoyed going through this, so kudos to your class and everybody and all the other folks that you have taken from other works. A couple are sitting in the audience tonight that wrote a book that you've cited in a couple of occasions, so I just want to say thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow that. I read through everything. I looked at every image, and I was already quite aware of the significance of many of the buildings in Urbana. But if anybody had any doubt about it, I think they could read this document and get a lot out of that. So I thought it was really terrific.
Thank you.
I mean, I thought that it did the job of, if you start with the questions about whether or not, in fact, meets these criteria, I think that the evidence given within this large document amply demonstrates that, in fact, it does.
Thanks. The large document used to be a lot larger, actually. When I sent it to the state for the initial review earlier this year, they said, well, we don't do nominations like this anymore. And I said, what do you mean? They said, oh, well, you just need to really cut back on it. And so things that were 10 pages became 1 page. And yeah, so.
It's the dissertations.
Yeah. So anyway, if you think it's long now, be glad you didn't see it sooner.
Dave, do you? Well, I agree. I think it's a wonderfully written document. I learned a lot about the history of some of these buildings, which I found fascinating.
Thank you.
I guess at this point, we have to either have I guess we come to a consensus, a motion.
Oh, yeah. So do we actually need a motion, or are we just coming to a consensus?
I think if you, said, what about a straw poll? Do people feel that do members of the commission feel that this meets the criteria of the National Register of Historic Places? And then you could just go down the row and say who you are and whether you felt it met the criteria.
Well, let's do that straw poll. And
All right.
let me know what you think.
As
if
we
it
do
meets-
that, can we just keep in mind, too, that part of the reason to do this is then to direct the vice chair to complete the application to be submitted to IHSAC, selecting approve. So in a sense, as we're doing the straw poll, it's also to say, please go forward with that.
Who would like to start?
I'll start, I guess. So my general opinion is that this does meet the criteria of the Urbana zoning ordinance, section 1210, B2, that this nomination shows that these buildings, this district is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the patterns of our history, and also 4, that they embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master, Joseph Royer. So that's my opinion, and I would like the vice chair to fill out the appropriate paperwork that says that if we all agree to that straw poll, that that's how we feel.
Dave?
Yes, I would agree that we should move forward with the nomination.
David?
And I agree with all of that.
I too agree with that. So I'll be happy to fill out the paperwork.
Thank you very much.
Well, I want, thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you,
everybody.
Alice, thank you and your class
Yeah,
for
thank you.
your hard work.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Next, we have monitoring of historic properties. Anybody have anything?
I've got 2 and 1 additional. I just wanted to again bring up the fact that there was a letter of intent that was signed Monday night, or that was approved Monday night by the city council to move forward with a redevelopment deal on the landmark. I came to the meeting and, it was across the board, everybody approved the letter of intent. There were a couple of things that were mentioned, like the exterior of the building is going to be reconditioned, which was kind of weird. But I believe that staff then said, well, it could have been rehabilitation, could have been the word that was used, or restoration could have been, so they were kind of using reconditioned as an interchangeable term in the staff report. And the other thing was like, keep the historic properties where feasible, but we were told in the meeting that the prospective owner of the property wants to go for both federal and possibly state tax credits. So they're looking forward to keeping the historic nature of the building. There was something that came up, though. One of the questions was, would the non-conforming part of the hotel need to be, any changes to that need to be reviewed by the HPC? And when I was asked that question, I wasn't quite sure, so I thought I'd bring that up here. And then I did want to also mention that something else that passed Monday night was a new fee structure for the city, and one of the fees that was added was a $200 fee to apply for a landmark nomination if the owner is not in agreement. And that also passed. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that, too. Only if the owner is not in agreement. And it was put forth that because staff has additional duties that they must fulfill if an owner is not in agreement, that it kind of bears the same weight as other permitting fees in the city bear. So again, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And the third thing is, I happened to be driving down Windsor today and noticed that the Mumford Barn is looking really scary. There's some clapboard coming off of it, the paint is peeling, some of the windows that were covered are exposed. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention too. I know that we've talked about the Mumford House in the past, but the Mumford Barn that got moved to Windsor and Race is looking a little scary too.
Okay, thank you. So the fee, the addition of a fee for certain cases of landmark applications, then that's a zoning change? that was reviewed as part of,
No, that goes into our fee schedule, so.
it's not something that goes into the ordinance?
No, it doesn't go into the ordinance.
Okay. Let's see, monitoring of historic properties. I forget which cottage it was, but PACA had their annual awards meeting, Heritage Awards, a few weeks ago, and one of the Buena Vista cottages, Susan, do you remember which one it was? Number 5, thank you, Phyllis. Cottage number 5 got a PACA award for restoration of stucco. But then in the realm of monitoring of historic properties, I'd have to say I'm really concerned about overall Buena Vista Court and some pretty serious deterioration on at least 2 of the units there. So if there's anything the city could do, and I think we've brought this up before too, concern over the Buena Vista. Is there any additional staff report?
There is not.
Okay, good, thank you. Sorry, nothing personal, but. We have no study session. Any announcements? No announcements?
Well, if you didn't notice, this is Marcus.
Oh, yes.
He's been a planner with us for a couple of years. He's going to be doing the bulk of historic preservation cases and such. I've been helping him along, but he's picked it up very quickly, as you could tell by his memo and presentation tonight.
Great, thank you and welcome, Marcus. Thank you. We'll try not to drive you nuts. Try. If there are no further announcements, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned, thank you.